Puerto Rico is a Caribbean archipelago with a complicated colonial history and political status. It is located about 1,000 miles southeast of Florida and is part of the United States. Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States, hence all 3.2 million of its population are citizens of the United States. On the other hand, island-based Puerto Ricans have no voting representation in Congress and are not allowed to vote in presidential elections while being subject to the federal laws of the United States. It is a territory of the United States, hence it is neither a state nor a sovereign nation on its own. Colonialism of the Spanish Empire. When Christopher Columbus disembarked on the west coast of Puerto Rico on November 19, 1493, local Tamas occupied the territory, which they referred to as Borican. Christopher Columbus was the first European to set foot on this coast. The explorer moved quickly to assert ownership of the island for Spain and rechristened it as San Juan Bautista. Puerto Rico was subject to Spanish colonial power for a period of 400 years. During this historical period, the island was subject to high levels of repression and taxation, and it also faced terrible levels of poverty. Around the middle of the 19th century, Puerto Ricans who were fed up with their government began to rebel. In 1868, hundreds of pro-independence Puerto Ricans gathered in the mountain village of Lares to stage an uprising. Even though the Spanish military was able to put down the insurrection, it was a watershed moment for the island. Slavery was finally abolished, national political parties were established, and Spain started offering Puerto Rico some degree of autonomy. When the United States waged war on Spain in 1898, however, the decades-long period of relative sovereignty came to an end. During the Spanish-American War on July 25, 1898, American troops invaded Puerto Rico and occupied the island for the remaining months of the conflict. After the signing of the Treaty of Paris in December, which officially brought an end to the war, Spain handed Puerto Rico to the United States. Just 1 year after Spain gave Puerto Rico the right to govern itself, American troops raised the flag of the United States over the Caribbean nation, thus establishing U.S. control over the island's 1 million inhabitants. In July 1898, as the Spanish-American War was drawing to a close, forces from the United States of America began an invasion of Puerto Rico. At 108 miles in length and 40 miles in width, Puerto Rico was one of Spain's two most important colonies in the Caribbean. U.S. troops were able to seize the island by the middle of August despite facing relatively little opposition and suffering only 7 fatalities. On October 18, shortly after an armistice was signed between Spain and the United States, the island was handed up to the forces of the United States. The position of military governor was given to United States General John R. Brooke. The Spanish-American War came to a conclusion with the signing of the Treaty of Paris in December, which gave the United States of America the official go-ahead to take possession of Puerto Rico, becoming a territory of the United States. A military administration was established by the United States, and it administered the territory until April 12, 1900, when a civilian government was established under the Four-Acre Act. This change occurred under the United States' control. Before the turn of the 20th century, the federal government of the United States accorded statehood to territories that it had conquered throughout the American continent by primarily moving westward and southward. Despite this, Puerto Rico is officially considered an unincorporated territory. Some American politicians, according to Christina D. Poncecross, a professor of legal history at Columbia Law School, feared that if Puerto Rico were accepted as a state, there would be racial mixing between white Americans living in the contiguous United States and non-white Puerto Ricans. This was a concern because Puerto Ricans are predominantly non-white. Puerto Ricans were not citizens of the United States and had only limited autonomy over their government, which was overseen by a governor selected by the United States. On the island, pro-independence movements continued to voice their support for autonomy. The United States of America passed the Jones-Shafroth Act in 1917 to calm tensions. This act granted U.S. citizenship to the majority of Puerto Ricans, although it did so with certain restrictions. By the legislation, a Senate and a Bill of Rights were established. Despite this, the President of the United States and the members of Congress retained the authority to veto Puerto Rican laws. The Selective Service Act, on the other hand, mandated that all male citizens of the United States, including Puerto Rico, must register for active duty in the armed forces. Almost 20,000 Puerto Rican men served in the United States military during World War I. Among those individuals, the majority were from the island of Puerto Rico. After more than 3 decades, in the year 1950, the United States permitted Puerto Rico to write a constitution on the condition that it not change its territorial status, create a republican system of government, and establish a Bill of Rights. In 1952, the President of Puerto Rico and Congress gave their stamp of approval to the Constitution that had been drafted during a constitutional conference that had been held by the Puerto Rico legislature. The new Constitution renamed Puerto Rico the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, which was formerly known as Puerto Rico. Commonwealth opposed the free associated state. Even after decades of having the status of a commonwealth, there is still a great deal of misunderstanding over what exactly the classification entails. Early proponents of the name held the belief that it would bestow upon Puerto Rico a unique legal status distinct from that of a state, an independent country, or a territory. They concluded that the island was no longer considered a colony because it had an elected self-government and a constitution. Despite its status as a commonwealth, Pontecross and other constitutional scholars contend that Puerto Rico is still a colonial territory even though the United States Congress maintains control over the island's government. They base this contention on the fact that Puerto Rico's government is subject to the authority of the United States Congress. The issue of status is further complicated by the fact that the official name of Puerto Rico in Spanish is not the same as the name of the territory in English. In Spanish, the territory is referred to as El Estado Libre Asociado de Puerto Rico, which translates to a free associated state. In English, the term free associated state is used. An independent nation that has an expanded relationship with another nation as a result of a treaty is considered to be a free associated state by international law. This is another incorrect designation because Puerto Rico is not a sovereign nation, but rather a territory of the United States of America. Puerto Rico's future. The people of Puerto Rico have been engaged in struggles for the decolonization of the archipelago for hundreds of years. Statehood, improved Commonwealth status, in which Puerto Rico remains in a partnership with the United States, but is given more authority, or independence are the three options that have been debated for a considerable amount of time as the most effective means of resolving this problem. According to Pontecross, the legal process to admit Puerto Rico into statehood would require only a few steps. First, the territory would have to adopt a constitution in preparation for statehood. Then Congress would have to approve the Constitution and may impose some additional conditions on the state to ensure it's in harmony with the larger federalist structure of the United States. And finally, Congress would pass legislation admitting the territory into statehood. In a similar vein, Congress can grant a territory its independence through the passing of a single piece of law. The procedure is made difficult by politics even though the Constitution and the law are straightforward. A referendum on statehood was put to the people of Puerto Rico in November 2020, but the results were not binding. The majority of Puerto Ricans, approximately 53%, were in support of statehood, while 47% were opposed to the idea. However, the turnout for the referendum was only 55% of eligible voters in Puerto Rico. However, opponents of statehood questioned the validity of the votes because referendums are non-binding, are frequently pushed entirely by the pro-statehood party, and include the opinions of just half of Puerto Rico's population. Statehood supporters interpreted the results as proof that the majority of Puerto Ricans want the territory to be admitted, but opponents of statehood questioned the legality of the ballots. Some people are opposed to Puerto Rico becoming a state because they believe that if it does so, Puerto Rico would become culturally identical to the rest of the United States. According to Pontecross, legally speaking, it's pretty simple, and he says this: the war is over in terms of trying to convince people either that they want statehood or that they do not want statehood. Did you like it? Tell us what you think of the video in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting videos.